When a world-famous pianist cruelly forces his maid's 10-year-old daughter to perform an impossible piece, the hall expects disaster, until her first note changes everything. The great Maestro Viktor Legrand's gala was meant to celebrate genius, his own. But when his star pianist falls ill, panic turns to cruelty. "You like the piano, girl? Then play it." 10-year-old Clara, the maid's daughter, stands beneath 1,000 lights, her mother's job, and her dignity, hanging by a thread. "Please, sir, she's just a child." But Legrand smiles. Tonight, the concert hall will witness humiliation, or something far greater. This is the story of how a servant's child silenced Vienna's most powerful man, and reminded the world where true music lives. And before I forget, where are you watching from today? Leave a comment below. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Enjoy the story. 10-year-old Clara knew the sound of every falling dust mote in the grand hall. She and her mother, Elena, were ghosts here, polishing a world they could never join. But tonight, the gala star pianist was sick, and the maestro was looking for someone to blame. The Vienna concert hall was not a room. It was a golden cavern, a place built for kings and emperors, not for maids. Tonight, it was more splendid than ever. It was the 20th anniversary gala of Maestro Viktor Legrand. Chandeliers, heavy with Austrian crystal, cast a light so bright it seemed to hum. They dripped light onto the endless rows of plush velvet seats. They shined on the polished wood of the stage, and they gleamed on the lid of the grand piano. It was a Bosendorfer Imperial, the finest piano in the world. It sat in the center of the stage like a sleeping black lion. In the back corridor, far from the splendor, Elena coughed. It was a dry, quiet cough that she tried to hide in her apron. Her 10-year-old daughter, Clara, stopped wiping the brass door handle and looked up. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight, sensible braid. "I am fine, shots," Elena whispered, though her face was pale. She leaned against the cold marble wall for just a second. "The maestro wants the green room dusted again. He said he found a particle of dust on the window sill." Clara nodded. She said very little. She just picked up her own cleaning rag and headed toward the green room. Maestro Viktor Legrand was a man carved from sharp angles. His tuxedo was perfect. His dark hair was slicked back, showing not a single sign of weakness. His face was famous across Europe. He was a genius, the critics said. He was also a man who enjoyed his power. He saw Elena and Clara slip into his private room. "Ah, the mice have returned," he said, not looking up from the musical score he was marking. "Did you use the lemon oil on the piano legs as I instructed?" "Yes, maestro," Elena said, her voice soft. "And you?" he said, his sharp eyes landing on Clara. "You will not touch anything. You will stand by the wall while your mother works. Children carry germs. This gala must be perfect." Clara pressed her back against the wallpaper. She held her breath. She watched the maestro's hands. They were long, pale, and spider-like. They moved through the air with arrogant grace. He was a god in this building. Her mother was just a servant. Elena worked quickly, her movements efficient. She was trying not to cough again. The medical bills were stacked on their small kitchen table at home. They were a mountain of paper that threatened to bury them. The debt was for Elena's lungs. The doctors used long, confusing words. Elena just knew she needed the medicine, and the medicine cost more than her wages. This job, cleaning for the great maestro, was all that kept them from ruin. "This room is acceptable," Legrand finally announced. He tossed his red ink pen onto the desk. "Now get out. I must prepare." Elena curtsied, a small, tired bend of the knee. "Yes, maestro." She grabbed Clara's hand, and they hurried back into the hallway. They spent the next hour polishing the patron's lounge. The sun began to set, and the golden light inside the hall deepened. Rehearsals had finished. The orchestra had gone for their dinner break. A deep, heavy silence fell over the building. It was Clara's favorite time. Elena was cleaning the mirrors on the far wall. "I must fetch the new soaps for the restrooms, Clara. Stay here. Do not wander." "Yes, Mama." But the moment Elena's soft footsteps faded, Clara felt the pull. It was always there. The low, magnetic hum of the stage. She slipped out of the lounge and into the main hall. It was empty. The lights were low. Only a single spotlight shined on the stage, illuminating the piano. Clara moved like a shadow. She walked down the velvet aisle. She climbed the few short steps to the stage. She stood before the sleeping lion. She knew she must not. The maestro's voice was sharp in her ears. Do not touch. But her fingers had a mind of their own. She looked at her small, chapped hands. They were red from lye soap and polishing oils. She gently wiped her right index finger on her apron until it was clean. Then, so lightly it barely made a sound, she touched one key. A single, perfect note. A middle C. It rose into the vast, empty hall and hung in the air like a star. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. What is the meaning of this? The voice was a whip crack. Clara jumped back, her heart leaping into her throat. Maestro Viktor Legrand stood in the wings. His face was dark with rage. You? The maid's child. How dare you? Clara froze. She could not speak. Filthy, he hissed, striding onto the stage. He loomed over her. You have put your dirty, common hands on my instrument. On the instrument. I'm sorry, sir, Clara whispered. Her body trembled. Sorry? You think sorry cleans the key? You think sorry undoes the disrespect? He looked at her with pure disgust. Where is your mother? She will be fired for this. Immediately. No. Clara cried out, the word echoing in the hall. Please. She needs this job. She is sick. She is careless, Legrand spat. To let a creature like you wander free. You think you belong here? You think you can touch what the greats have touched? Elena came running down the aisle, her face stricken with panic. Maestro, please. What has she done? She touched it, Legrand said, pointing at the piano as if Clara had spat on it. She defiled it. Clara, I told you to wait. Elena's voice was tight with fear. She grabbed Clara's arm. Maestro Legrand, I am so sorry. She is just a child. She does not understand. She understands presumption, Legrand said, his voice cold. She dreams above her station. Just then, a young man in a suit, an assistant named Mark, ran into the hall. He looked terrified. Maestro, it's terrible news. What now? Legrand snapped, turning from Elena. It's Arthur. Arthur Hamilton. Your student. He's ill. Terribly ill. Food poisoning. He cannot perform tonight, sir. He is unable to stand. The color drained from Viktor Legrand's face. What did you say? Arthur is sick, sir. He cannot play the Appassionata. He cannot. Legrand looked around the hall as if the walls were closing in. But the Baron is here for him. The critics. My 20th anniversary gala. It is ruined. Ruined. He paced the stage, his hands clenching and unclenching. He looked at his assistant, at the empty seats, and then his eyes fell on Clara. She was still standing near the piano, frozen, tears shining on her cheeks. Elena was pleading softly beside her. Please, sir, we need the money for the medicine. A slow, cruel smile spread across Viktor Legrand's face. It was a terrible sight. Ruined, you say? No, perhaps not. He walked back to Clara. He circled her, looking her up and down. So, you like the piano, girl? You like it so much you cannot keep your hands away. Clara said nothing. She just trembled. You want to be on the stage? He continued, his voice sickly sweet. You want to be a star like Arthur? Victor, please, Elena begged, sensing the danger. She is 10. She is an artist, it seems. Legrand laughed. Very well. The spot is open. Arthur is ill. You will play instead. Elena's blood ran cold. What? No, you cannot be serious. She is a child. She does not know how to play. You cannot do this. I can, Legrand said, his eyes glittering. She will be my special guest. A discovery. He leaned down, his face inches from Clara's. His voice was a low, venomous sneer. If you think you can play, he said, mocking her, do it tonight. She cannot. Elena cried, pulling Clara behind her. This is humiliation. It is evil. It is justice, Legrand said simply. He turned to his assistant. Mark, find this creature a dress. Something from the costume closet. Something that fits a performing monkey. Sir, I don't think. Mark stammered. Do it, Legrand roared. The audience will have their show. They expected a prodigy in Arthur. Instead, they will get a peasant. It will be entertainment. They will talk about my gala for years. Elena stood in front of her daughter, her body rigid. No, I will not let you. We will leave. Legrand's smile vanished. Leave, he said softly. Go ahead. You will be out on the street tonight. And I will personally call the hospital. I will tell them your credit is no longer good. I will tell them the maestro's office no longer guarantees your bills. Elena staggered, as if struck. She looked at Clara. She saw the terror in her daughter's eyes. But she also saw the towering medical bills, the pharmacist shaking his head, the empty bottle of pills. You see, Legrand said, enjoying his victory. We are in agreement. He turned to Clara. You will go on that stage. You will sit at that piano. You will try to play the Appassionata. And when you fail, when the entire hall is laughing at your pathetic attempt, you will be thrown out. He looked at Elena. And you? You will be fired anyway. But perhaps, he added, as if granting a great mercy, I will pay your last week's wages. He straightened his tuxedo. Mark, the dress. Now, the guests arrive in 2 hours. The room they were given was not a dressing room. It was a utility closet, cold and damp. It smelled of floor wax and old mops. A single, bare bulb hung from the ceiling. Elena locked the door. For a long moment, she could not speak. She leaned against a metal shelf, her shoulders shaking. The cough returned, this time a harsh, racking sound that echoed in the small space. Clara rushed to her, her own fear forgotten. Mama? Mama, sit down. She pulled a wooden stool from the corner. Elena sank onto it, hiding her face in her hands. We must run, Clara, she whispered, her voice muffled. We must leave this city. He is a monster. This is a sickness of the soul. Clara stood before her, her small hands clenched at her sides. She was pale, but her blue eyes were dry. Where would we go, Mama? The doctors are here. The hospital is here. But what he is asking, it is a public shame. He wants to destroy you, to make you a joke. I cannot watch that. I will not. He wants to see me cry, Clara said, her voice quiet and thin. He wants to see me run. Then we will run. Clara shook her head. No, Mama. You taught me. We do not run. She touched her mother's arm. You will not kneel to him. Ever. Elena looked up at her 10-year-old daughter. She saw a resolve that terrified her. Clara, you cannot play the piano. You have never had a lesson. I could not afford it. Clara was silent. She looked at the rough concrete floor. I listened, she said. Listen? Listen to what? To Arthur. When he practices. I hide in the upstairs balcony. He plays every Tuesday and Thursday. He plays the Appassionata. You have heard the piece? Elena asked, confused. Yes, Mama. He plays it wrong. Elena stared. What? What are you saying? He is the maestro's star. He is, Clara agreed. But he plays too fast. He thinks the music is in the speed. He is trying to sound angry. She paused. The music is not angry, Mama. It is sad. It's like a storm, but it's lost. A sharp knock made them both jump. Frau Schmidt, open the door. I have the dress. It was Mark, the assistant. Elena unlocked the door. Mark looked miserable. He held up a hanger. On it was a pale blue dress, clearly an old costume from an opera. It was made of cheap, shiny satin and had puffy, ridiculous sleeves. It was far too large for a 10-year-old. It was all I could find, Mark mumbled, not meeting Elena's eyes. Maestro said it would do. Elena took the dress. The fabric felt like plastic. Thank you, Mark. Mark lingered. Listen, he whispered, leaning in. He is a cruel man. When you go out there, just sit. Don't touch the keys. He will come out. He will dismiss you. It will be over quickly. Do not try to play. It will only be worse. Thank you, Elena said again, her voice numb. Mark nodded and hurried away. Elena held the dress up to Clara. It was a joke. A clown's costume. We will make it fit, Elena said, her voice suddenly fierce. She took a small sewing kit from her apron pocket. Turn around. As Elena gathered the glittering fabric and began to pin the waist, Clara's hand went to her own pocket. She pulled out a small, tarnished silver locket. It was heavy. Elena saw it. Her hand stilled. Your grandfather. Clara nodded, her fingers tracing the engraving on the front. A simple, faded crest. He would be so angry to see this. To see us like this. No, Elena said, her voice softening. Not angry. He would be heartbroken. He hated bullies. He hated men like Legrand. He taught me to listen, Mama. I know, Liebling. Elena threaded the needle. He was a great man. A hero. People forget that. They see an old soldier with a limp. He wasn't just a soldier, Clara said, reciting a family story. He played. Before the war. Yes, Elena said, a sad smile touching her lips. He played for royalty, they said. In palaces. But the war. It took everything. It broke his hands. The shrapnel. He could never play again. It broke his heart. He said the music never left him. Clara whispered, clutching the locket. It just got stuck. He said he could still hear it. In his head. He said the piano isn't in the fingers, Mama. He said it's in the silence. The silence between the notes. Elena stopped sewing. She looked at her daughter's reflection in the cracked mirror. What are you saying, Clara? He hummed the songs to me. When I was small. Before he. Yes. Clara turned around, the half-pinned dress bunching around her. He hummed the Appassionata. He said it was the one he missed the most. He said it was Beethoven's soul trying to get out. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. A wild, impossible hope began to dawn. Clara, you cannot play a sonata from humming. I don't play it from humming, Clara said simply. I play it from memory. From what grandfather taught me. From what Arthur played wrong. Before Elena could process this, the door was flung open. Maestro Legrand stood there, his face a mask of impatience. It is time, he said. He looked at the dress. He looked at Clara's small, pale face. He laughed. It was a short, barking sound. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. You look like a doll dragged from the trash. He grabbed Clara's arm. His fingers dug into her skin. No. Elena cried, lunging forward. Legrand held up a hand. Ah, your job, Frau Schmidt. Your medicine. He smiled at Elena's frozen, horrified expression. I will be in the wings. I want to watch every second. Do not disappoint me, little mouse. He dragged Clara out of the room and into the chaos backstage. The noise was overwhelming. The audience was a massive, shuffling beast. The orchestra was already seated on stage, the musicians dark forms like ravens. The air was hot and smelled of expensive perfume and dust. Clara's legs felt like water. She was going to be sick. This was real. Viktor shoved her toward the stage manager. This is our surprise guest. She will play after my opening remarks. Send her out when I give the signal. The stage manager looked at Clara, baffled, but nodded. Viktor leaned down to Clara one last time. Remember, he whispered, his breath hot on her ear. Everyone is watching. They are all waiting to laugh. Go. Make me proud. He walked away, straightening his cuffs, and stepped onto the stage to a deafening roar of applause. Clara stood in the darkness of the wings. She was trembling so hard she could barely stand. She could hear his voice, smooth and powerful, booming through the speakers. A small change in our program. My brilliant student, Arthur Hamilton, has been taken ill, but the gala must go on. She heard polite murmurs of sympathy. Tonight, we have a debut. A last-minute discovery. A young talent I have found in the most unexpected of places. Please welcome, Miss Clara Schmidt. The stage manager gently pushed her. Go on, child. Clara looked at the rectangle of light. It seemed a mile away. She felt the locket, warm in her pocket. She thought of her mother, sick and afraid. She thought of her grandfather, his broken hands, his sad melodies. He wants to see me cry, Mama. Then you will not, Clara. You will not. Clara's trembling stopped. She took a deep breath. She let go of the fear. She held on to the silence. She began to walk. She stepped out of the darkness and into the blinding light. The applause was light, confused. The audience saw a small, skinny girl in a ridiculous, oversized blue dress. Her blonde hair was coming undone from its braid. She looked tiny. She looked lost. In the front row, a baroness whispered to her husband, What is this? Is this a joke? In the wings, Viktor Legrand folded his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. He had his humiliation. Clara walked to the center of the stage. She did not look at the crowd. She looked only at the piano, the sleeping black lion. She sat on the bench. Her feet did not touch the floor. The hall was silent. The whispers had stopped. There was only a heavy, awful expectation. Everyone was waiting for the joke. Everyone was waiting for the child to burst into tears. Clara looked at the 88 keys. It's not in the fingers, Liebling. It's in the silence. She placed her small, chapped hands on the keyboard. Then, she began to play. It was not a child's note. It was not the hesitant plink of a first-year student. It was not a mistake. The first chord of Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 23, the Appassionata, struck the hall. It was deep, resonant, and perfect. It was quiet, but it was not weak. It was a question asked of the darkness. In the front row, the baroness, who had been fixing her pearls, froze. Her hand stopped midway to her neck. In the wings, Viktor Legrand's smirk faltered. He tilted his head, like a dog hearing a strange sound. That was correct. A lucky first note. Then came the second. And the third. The opening phrase. A low, ominous rumble from the piano's depths. A melody of pure, aching sorrow. The entire hall held its breath. The silence was no longer heavy with expectation. It was heavy with shock. Clara's eyes were closed. She was no longer in the golden cavern. She was no longer a 10-year-old girl in a borrowed dress. She was in her grandfather's small, dark room. She was listening to him hum, his voice rough and broken, as he stared out the window at the rain. He was telling her about the war. He was telling her about the music he had lost. The music isn't in the fingers, Clara. It's in the silence. She was playing the silence. The music flowed from her. The famous, difficult opening. She played it not with Arthur's technical, angry speed, but with a terrible, patient sadness. She played the story of a great man trapped in a storm. Viktor Legrand's face had gone white. The glass of champagne in his hand began to tremble. No, he whispered to himself. Impossible. He was a genius. He knew this piece better than his own name. He knew every fingering, every required shift and weight. What he was hearing was not just correct. It was profound. A critic in the third row, a man famous for his acidic reviews, slowly lowered his eyeglasses. He leaned forward, his mouth slightly open. Backstage, in the dark corridor by the utility closet, Elena heard it. She had crept out, expecting to hear the crash of wrong notes, the awful laughter, the sound of her daughter's humiliation. Instead, she heard the Appassionata. She heard the music her own father had hummed. The melody he had wept over when he thought no one was watching. She pressed her hand to her mouth, her knuckles white. It was her father's playing. It was his soul, coming from her daughter's hands. On stage, Clara moved into the first ferocious cascade of notes. The storm had broken. Her small hands, red and chapped from cleaning, became a blur. They flew across the keys, impossibly fast, yet impossibly clear. Every note was distinct, like a perfect, hard diamond. Where Arthur had pounded, she danced. Where Arthur had rushed, she controlled. She commanded the piano. The sleeping lion was awake, and it was singing for her. Viktor Legrand stepped out of the wings, into the shadow, just to see. He had to see her hands. He saw them, and his blood ran cold. She was not struggling. She was not guessing. She was playing with a preternatural authority. Her small body rocked with the force of the music, her feet barely able to reach the pedals, yet she used them with flawless precision. She was not just playing the notes. She was interpreting the piece. She was telling Beethoven's story. He knew, in that single, horrifying moment, that he was not looking at a child. He was not looking at a maid's daughter. He was looking at something that should not exist. He was looking at a master. The first movement ended. The audience, bound by concert etiquette, did not applaud, but a sound rippled through them. A collective gasp. A low murmur of disbelief. Clara did not pause. She did not look up. She did not acknowledge them. She took a single, measured breath and let her hands fall into the second movement. The theme was a hymn. Calm. Reflective. It was the eye of the storm. After the fire and fury of the first movement, this was a moment of grace. Clara played it with a sweetness so profound it was almost unbearable. It was the sound of a heart remembering peace. An elderly woman in the fifth row openly wept. She dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Viktor Legrand was no longer just shocked. He was angry. A deep, burning, professional poison was rising in his throat. He was being upstaged, at his own gala, by a 10-year-old mouse. He had planned a joke, and instead, he had summoned a giant. He looked around for his assistant. "Mark," he hissed. "Stop her. Pull her off the stage. The lights. Cut the lights." But Mark was not there. Mark was standing at the back of the hall, near Elena, his eyes wide, tears streaming down his face. He was in awe. No one was listening to the maestro. Everyone was listening to the piano. Clara began the third and final movement. It was a torrent, a perpetual, rolling wave of sound. It was one of the most demanding pieces ever written for the instrument. It required strength. It required stamina. It required a power a 10-year-old could not possibly possess. Viktor watched, a bitter smile twisting his lips. Now she will fail. The child cannot sustain this. Her arms will give out. Clara's arms did not give out. She seemed to draw strength from the air itself. She played with a ferocity that was terrifying. She was the storm. She was the lightning. She was the thunder. She was her grandfather's lost youth. She was her mother's silent pain. She was every time she had been told to stand by the wall, to not touch, to be invisible. It was not just music. It was a reckoning. The final, brutal, defiant chords hammered through the hall. One after another, a final, desperate, triumphant scream. And then, the final note. A low, dark C. It faded. Clara's hands remained on the keys for a long moment. The Vienna concert hall, a room built for sound, was completely, totally silent. No one coughed. No one whispered. No one moved. The Baroness's hand was still at her throat. The critic's glasses were still in his hand. In that moment, there was no orchestra. There was no gala. There was no famous maestro. There was only a small girl in a blue dress and the ghost of a sound that had shaken the world. The maid's daughter had just silenced the world's greatest pianist. The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 3. It was Viktor Legrand who broke it. He could not help himself. A strangled sound came from his throat. A noise of pure, undiluted rage. It was like a spell breaking. A man in the balcony, a stranger, jumped to his feet. "Brava!" he roared. And the golden cavern exploded. The applause was not polite. It was a tidal wave. It was a thunderstorm of sound. The entire audience rose as one. They were shouting. They were cheering. "Brava! Brava! Incredible!" Clara finally looked up. She blinked, as if waking from a dream. She saw the thousands of faces, all looking at her. She saw them standing. She saw them smiling, weeping. She slid off the high piano bench. And, in front of the entire Vienna elite, she curtsied. A small, perfect, dignified dip, the way her mother had taught her. This only made the crowd roar louder. Viktor Legrand, his face a mask of thunder, strode onto the stage. He had to shield his eyes. The spotlight was now fully on Clara, and he was in her shadow. He walked to her side. The audience thought he was coming to congratulate her. They applauded him, too. "Maestro, what a discovery!" Viktor grabbed Clara's upper arm. His fingers bit into her skin, just as they had backstage. He smiled for the crowd, a ghastly, stretched smile that did not reach his dead eyes. He leaned close to her ear, his voice a venomous whisper beneath the roar of applause. "You are finished. You are nothing. You stole this. I will destroy you. I will destroy your mother." Clara looked up at him. Her face was calm. The fear was gone. She had played the Appassionata. She had faced the lion. This man was nothing. "No, sir," she said, her voice clear and small, but not trembling. "You will not." The crowd surged forward. They were pushing past the velvet ropes. The Baroness was first. Her face was a mask of ecstatic disbelief. My dear child. Who are you? Where did you come from?" It was divine." She glared at Viktor. "Viktor, you old fox. You told us she was a discovery. You did not tell us she was a miracle." Viktor's smile cracked. "Baroness, a moment of—" "She must come with me," the Baroness declared, pulling a diamond-ringed hand away from Viktor's grasp and taking Clara's. "I am hosting the post-gala reception. She will be the guest of honor. Now, Baroness, she is just a child. She is my student's replacement," Viktor stammered, trying to regain control. "Student? This girl is no student. She is a master," the critic from the third row announced, having climbed onto the stage. He was holding his notepad. "Young lady, what is your name?" "Clara," she said. "Clara Schmidt." "Clara Schmidt," the critic repeated, writing it down. "And who was your teacher? Who taught you to play like that? Was it Liszt?" "Resurrected." Clara looked past the critic, past the fawning Baroness. She looked into the darkness at the back of the hall. She saw a shadow, a woman holding her hand to her mouth. "My grandfather," Clara said, her voice carrying in a sudden lull. "Your grandfather? Who is he? Is he here tonight?" "No, sir. He is gone." His name was Michael Schmidt. A very old man at the edge of the stage, leaning on a cane, gasped. He was a retired general, covered in military medals. "Schmidt? Michael Schmidt? The Michael Schmidt? The Angel of the Rhine?" The Baroness looked confused. "The what?" "Before your time, Baroness," the general said, his voice gravelly. He pushed his way forward, his eyes locked on Clara. He was a hero, a virtuoso musician who gave it all up to fight. He was captured, tortured. They broke his hands. He saved my entire platoon. I thought he died. He lived, Clara said softly, touching the locket in her pocket. But he never played again. Until tonight, the old general whispered. He looked at Clara with a profound, soul-shaking respect. He brought his cane up and, with a stiff back, he saluted her. He lives in you, child. Tonight, we heard Michael Schmidt play. This new revelation swept through the hall like fire. A war hero's granddaughter. A broken genius's legacy. It was more than a performance. It was a story. It was a legend being born. Viktor Legrand, forgotten at the side of the stage, was vibrating with a rage so pure it made him dizzy. This was his night. His gala. His 20th anniversary. And they had all forgotten him. They were surrounding her. The maid's child. The descendant of some dusty soldier. He saw his career, his reputation, his night, all being stolen by a 10-year-old in a tacky blue dress. Elena, seeing the crowd, seeing the general salute, finally ran from the back. She burst through the wings and onto the stage. Clara. Oh, my Clara. She ran to her daughter, ignoring the maestro, ignoring the baroness, and wrapped her in her arms. She was sobbing, tears of terror and pride and relief. You were. I'm okay, Mama, Clara whispered, hugging her back. Viktor saw his chance. Ah, here she is. The mother, he announced, his voice dripping with false cheer. Elena, our loyal maid. The crowd quieted. They looked at Elena's simple black dress, her worn hands, her tear-streaked face. They looked at Clara. Maid, the baroness repeated, her voice sharp. Yes, Viktor said, his smile turning cruel. He saw his path to victory. He would reframe this. This was not genius. This was a party trick. She works for me. A wonderful servant. She cleans my floors. It seems her daughter has an amusing little habit. The mood in the room shifted. The warmth cooled. The crowd was confused. A maid's daughter? You knew? The critic asked, looking at Viktor. You knew she could play like this? Of course not. Viktor laughed. I was bringing her out as a moment of levity. Our little mascot. I had no idea she could actually find the keys. A remarkable feat of mimicry. Like a parrot. That was not mimicry, the general growled. I heard that music in 1944. That was soul. A simple, soulful child then, Viktor said, patting Clara on the head. She flinched. But now, the joke is over. It is late. The child must be tired. He turned to Elena. Elena, take your daughter home. You are dismissed. He had done it. He had fired her. He had called her child a parrot and a joke. He had reasserted his control. He was the maestro. They were the help. Elena looked at him. The fear was gone. She was holding the hand of the girl who had just silenced Vienna. She was the daughter of Michael Schmidt. She stood up straight. No, maestro, Elena said, her voice ringing out, clear and strong. Viktor's smile twitched. What did you say? I said, no, Elena repeated. We are not dismissed. You see, maestro, I quit. A gasp, sharp and collective, was the reply. The audience had come for music. They were being given a revolution. Viktor Legrand's face went from white to a deep, mottled purple. The veins in his neck stood out. Fired, he hissed, his voice so low it was barely audible, yet filled with a terrifying pressure. I said you are fired, you ungrateful. That will be quite enough, Viktor. The voice was not Elena's. It was the baroness's. She had pushed her way right to the front, her diamonds glittering. She looked at Viktor Legrand as if he were something she had found on the bottom of her shoe. This young lady, the baroness said, gesturing to Clara, is the guest of honor at my reception. And her mother, she turned a warm, brilliant smile on Elena, is my personal guest. She held out her gloved hand. Not to Viktor. To Elena. Frau Schmidt, will you and your daughter join me? I find the air in this hall has become toxic. Viktor Legrand was frozen. He was a man watching his own kingdom burn to the ground. You cannot. I am the host. This is my gala. It was your gala, Viktor, the critic from the third row said, stepping up beside the baroness. He had his notepad open. Now it is hers. He nodded at Clara. The girl is a charlatan. Viktor roared, finally losing the last of his composure. The mask of the maestro was gone. All that was left was a red-faced, screaming man. She is a trick. A train monkey. I will have her investigated. I will have you all thrown out. You will do nothing of the sort, the old general said. He stepped forward, his metals clinking softly. He was no longer a stooped old man. He stood tall, his voice a parade ground command. You have, in the span of 30 minutes, insulted a war hero, humiliated a child, and attempted to defraud the public. But worst of all, the general looked him dead in the eye. You have shown yourself to be a man of no honor, and a very, very poor judge of music. He turned to the audience, which was watching, transfixed. I, for one, would rather spend my evening with the granddaughter of Michael Schmidt than in the presence of this noise. He offered his arm to Elena. Frau Schmidt, if you would do me the honor. Elena looked at the Baroness's outstretched hand. She looked at the general's crooked arm. She looked at the crowd, their faces a mix of pity, admiration, and contempt for the man on the stage. And she looked at her daughter. Clara was watching her, her blue eyes clear. Elena let go of Clara's hand. She did not take the Baroness's hand. She did not take the general's arm. She stepped forward, past them. She walked directly to Maestro Viktor Legrand. He flinched, as if expecting her to strike him. Elena stopped a foot in front of him. She was a simple woman, in a plain black dress. He was a celebrated genius in a bespoke tuxedo. But in that moment, she towered over him. She said nothing. She simply looked at him. She let him see her. Not the maid. Not the mouse. Not the sick, indebted woman. She let him see Elena Schmidt, mother of Clara, daughter of Michael. Then, with the same dignity her daughter had shown, she curtsied. It was not a curtsy of subservience. It was not the small, tired bend of the knee she gave him in the green room. It was a slow, deliberate, formal bow. A farewell. It was the most devastating act of defiance the hall had ever seen. It was dismissal. Then she turned her back on him. She walked to her daughter and took her hand. Come, Clara. This way, my dears, the Baroness trilled, as if this had been the plan all along. She led the way off the stage. The general and the critic flanked Elena and Clara like a guard of honor. As they walked down the aisle, the audience, in a spontaneous, massive wave, parted for them. And as they passed, people began to applause. It started softly, just a few. Then it grew. It was not the wild, shocked roar from before. It was a deep, rolling, sustained ovation. It was not for the performance. It was for the woman who had said no. It was for the child who had spoken the truth. Viktor Legrand was left alone on the vast, empty stage. The orchestra was still seated behind him, their instruments silent, all of them staring. The spotlight was still on. He stood in the white-hot circle of his own humiliation. His 20th anniversary gala was, as he had predicted, a ruin. The Baroness's private reception room was in the oldest wing of the concert hall. It was a jewel box, lined with red silk wallpaper and lit by a roaring fireplace. A table overflowed with champagne glasses, tiny sandwiches, and gleaming pastries. Clara had never seen anything like it. It was warmer than the stage. Safer. Elena, however, was trembling so hard she had to sit down. The moment the door closed, the strength that had held her up seemed to drain away. "Oh, heavens," she whispered, sinking into a velvet armchair. "Oh, my heavens! What have I done?" The Baroness immediately bustled over, pouring a glass of water with her own jeweled hands. "What have you done? My dear, you have given Vienna the best evening of theater it has seen in a decade. Do not tremble. You are safe now." "But, my job," Elena said, her voice small. "The medical bills. He will ruin us." "He will do nothing," the Baroness said, her voice sharp as a diamond. She handed Elena the water. "Viktor Legrand has just ended his own career. As for your bills," she smiled. "My husband, the Baron, is the chief administrator of St. Anna's Hospital. I believe he is a great patron of the arts." She looked at Clara, who was standing by the fire, her blue dress looking suddenly very small and very cheap in the opulent room. "And this," the Baroness said, her voice softening, "is the greatest artist I have ever had the privilege to meet." Elena's eyes filled with tears. You mean?" "I mean your medical debt is paid," the Baroness said simply, as if discussing the weather. "Consider it a finder's fee for bringing this miracle to us." Elena began to cry, not the hacking, dry cough of her illness, but deep, shuddering sobs of relief. The mountain of paper that had been crushing them, the fear that had haunted her sleep, it was gone. Clara ran to her mother and wrapped her small arms around her neck. "It's okay, Mama. It's okay. I told you. I know, Liebling." Elena wept, clutching her daughter. "I know." The old general cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable, as old soldiers often do, in the face of such powerful emotion. He walked over to Clara. "Miss Schmidt." Clara looked up, her cheek still pressed against her mother's. Your grandfather. Michael. He played for my men. In a bombed-out church. The night before the final push. The general's eyes were distant, seeing a different, darker room. He had no piano. He just hummed. He hummed Beethoven. He gave us courage. He gave us peace. He was the bravest man I ever knew. He reached into his pocket and took out a small, heavy, bronze medal. This is the St. Florian medal. For courage in the face of overwhelming fire. I was with him when he was captured. When they broke his hands. He never cried out. Not once. He pressed the medal into Clara's small, chapped hand. He would have wanted you to have this. You have his hands, but you also have his courage. Clara's fingers closed around the medal. It was heavy, like her locket. Thank you, sir, she whispered. No, the general said, his voice thick. Thank you. I have not heard that music, truly heard it, in 50 years. The critic, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke. Miss Clara, he said gently, the world will want to know. The Baroness is right. You are not a student. You are a master. But how? Your mother said you never had a lesson. Clara looked at her mother, who nodded, her tears slowing. Mama could not afford lessons, Clara said simply. So grandfather taught me. Taught you? But, with his hands. He didn't need his hands, Clara said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. He taught me with his voice. He would hum. And he taught me the why. The why? The critic asked, leaning in. He said anyone can learn the notes. He said the notes are just spots on a page. He said the music is what happens between the notes. She held up her hand and spread her fingers. It's the space. The silence. He said you have to play the silence, not the sound. He said that's where the soul is. The critic stared at her. He slowly put down his pen. I listen, Clara continued. I hid in the hall and listened to Arthur, the maestro's student. And what did you hear? I heard him playing the notes, Clara said. He played them very fast, very loud. But he was afraid. The maestro, he made him afraid. Arthur was playing for the maestro. And who were you playing for, Clara? The general asked. Clara looked at the medal in her hand. Then she looked at her mother, who was finally, truly, smiling. I was playing for my grandfather, she said. Just then, the door opened. It was Mark, the young assistant. He looked like he had run a mile. His face was pale. Baroness. General. I'm so sorry to interrupt. What is it, Mark? The Baroness asked. What about the maestro? He's gone, Mark said, catching his breath. He just walked out. He didn't say a word. He just left the building. The orchestra is still on stage. The audience, they are waiting. Waiting for what? The critic asked. For her, Mark said, nodding at Clara. They don't want to leave. They want an encore. A new silence fell on the room. Well, the Baroness finally said, a slow, delighted smile spreading across her face. This is unprecedented. What will happen to him? Elena asked, her voice quiet. The critic snapped his notebook shut. I can tell you exactly what will happen. Tomorrow, my review will be on the front page. It will not be about Viktor Legrand's 20th anniversary. It will be about the night a 10-year-old girl taught him the meaning of music. He bowed to Clara. His career in Vienna is over. He humiliated himself. He showed his true colors. No one will hire a bully who is, and I mean this with all sincerity, a lesser musician than his own maid's daughter. The justice was swift. It was total. Viktor Legrand had built his own prison and thrown away the key. But what about Clara? Elena asked, looking at her daughter with a new, dazed wonder. What happens to us now? The Baroness clapped her hands. What happens now? Now the world happens. She beamed. The Vienna Conservatory, they will be begging to have her. I will personally see to it. A full scholarship. The finest tutors. A piano. A Bosendorfer of her very own. Anything she wants. The world is hers. It was a fairy tale ending. A perfect, golden circle. From the cold closet to the grandest conservatory in the world. Clara had been quiet, listening to it all. She looked at the medal. She looked at her mother's happy, tear-stained face. She looked at the adoring, powerful people surrounding her. She then looked at the Baroness. Baroness. Yes, my dear. The tutors, at the conservatory. The finest in the world. The very finest, the Baroness said, her rings flashing. Clara nodded, her small face serious. That is good, she said. I have a question. For them. The critic smiled, charmed. And what is that little one? Clara held up her hand again, her fingers spread wide, as her grandfather had taught her. I want to ask them, she said, her voice small but clear in the silent, silk-lined room. If they can teach me more about the silence. 6 months later, the spring sunlight that slanted through the tall, arched windows of the Vienna Conservatory was a different light. It was not the cold, sharp glitter of the gala chandeliers, but a warm, buttery yellow. It smelled of old wood, floor polish, and the sweet, resinous scent of violins. In a small, bright studio, Clara sat at a piano. This one was not a sleeping lion, but a patient friend. Her feet still did not quite touch the floor, but a small, dignified wooden stool was placed beneath them. Opposite her, stroking his white beard, sat Professor Leopold Eisner. He was the most revered tutor at the conservatory, a man who had famously refused to teach anyone for the last 5 years, claiming there was nothing left to hear. He had requested Clara personally. She was playing a simple piece, a Mozart sonata. Her fingers, no longer chapped and red, moved with an economy of motion that was beautiful to watch. Stop, Professor Eisner said. His voice was like a cello, low and warm. Clara stopped, her hands hovering. There, he said, pointing to the score. The rest. The pause. You played it. Clara looked at him, confused. Yes, Professor. No, child. He leaned forward. Other students, they observe the rest. They count 1 beat too. They stop and they wait. You played it. I heard the silence. It had shape. It had a meaning. He looked at her, his ancient eyes bright with a profound, academic curiosity. Your grandfather? He was right. It is all in the space between. How does a 10-year-old know this? Clara thought for a moment. How does anyone not? She asked. The note is just the beginning. But the silence is the thought. Professor Eisner laughed, a dry, rustling sound. I have been teaching for 50 years, Fräulein Schmidt. 50 years of trying to make young geniuses understand what you just said. They all want to show me how fast their fingers can go. They bring me their speed. Their thunder. He sighed, looking out the window. You brought me your heart. He gestured for her to continue. Again, from the Adagio. And, Clara, take your time. Show me more of that silence. Clara smiled, a small, rare, and brilliant thing. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. She was no longer a curiosity. She was a student. She was home, 2 miles away, in a comfortable apartment overlooking a small, green park. Elena Schmidt poured tea. The cough was gone. The doctors at St. Anna's, under the Baroness's watchful eye, had worked their own miracle. New medicines, rest, and the absence of crushing, suffocating fear had brought the color back to her cheeks. She was no longer a ghost. Their new home was filled with light. There were books on the shelves, a warm rug on the floor, and on the wall, a single, framed photograph of her father, Michael, as a young man, his hands strong and whole. More tea, Baroness? Elena asked. Just a half cup, my dear, the Baroness said, settling into the armchair. She was not dressed for a gala, but in a simple, though exquisitely tailored, wool suit. She had become a regular visitor. At first, she had come as a patron, a duty. Now, she came as a friend. And her studies? The Baroness asked. Professor Eisner is pleased? He is, Elena said, a quiet pride in her voice. He says she teaches him, but she is still a child. She made me read her a storybook 3 times last night. Good, the Baroness said firmly. Let her be a child. The world will try to make her a monument soon enough. We must protect her. Elena nodded, her hands wrapped around the warm porcelain cup. I never knew a life like this was possible. To wake up and not be afraid. I cannot thank you enough. Nonsense, the Baroness said, waving her hand. You thanked me the day you turned your back on that odious man. I have never seen anything braver. She paused, a glint in her eye. As for Viktor Legrand, you have heard, I assume? Elena shook her head. She did not ask about him. She did not want to know. His contract was terminated, of course, the Baroness said, sipping her tea. The board was unanimous. The scandal, a critic calling him a lesser musician than a 10-year-old, well, he was finished. No one in Austria, or Germany, or France, will hire him. Where did he go? Elena asked, in spite of herself. I am told. Prague, the Baroness said with a delicate sniff. At a third-rate cabaret, he plays Chopin between a magician and a dancing dog act. In a smoky room in Prague, the piano was out of tune. The G-sharp stuck. Viktor Legrand, his tuxedo fraying slightly at the cuffs, hammered his way through the Appassionata. He played it faster than ever. It was a blur of angry, incoherent notes. He was playing for the memory of the Vienna crowd, trying to punish them with his brilliance. When he finished the third movement, breathing heavily, he hit the final chord with such force that the out-of-tune strings jangled in protest. A few tourists at a back table, half drunk, clapped. "Encore," one of them shouted, laughing. Viktor Legrand looked at his hands. The hands of a genius. He could not understand why they had betrayed him. He could not understand why the silence felt so empty. That evening, Clara and Elena walked into the Vienna concert hall. The usher, a new man, bowed deeply. "Frau Schmidt, Fräulein Schmidt, your seats are waiting." They were in the front row. Center. The Baroness had a permanent box, but Elena had wanted to sit here. The old general was waiting for them, his back stiff, his medals gleaming. He smiled when he saw Clara and bowed to Elena. "A good evening for music," he said. A new pianist, a young woman from America, was making her Vienna debut. Clara sat in the plush velvet seat, her new shoes just touching the floor. She looked at the stage. The grand piano, the sleeping black lion, sat in the spotlight. It was just a piano. The music began. It was beautiful. Clara listened. Elena, her hand resting on her daughter's, closed her eyes. She was not listening for dust. She was not afraid of a cough. She was not invisible. She was just Elena. And she was listening to the music. Clara, too, listened. She heard the notes. She heard the spaces between. She heard the story. And in the warm, golden dark of the concert hall, surrounded by friends, she felt her grandfather's heavy metal in her pocket. And she knew, with the simple, profound certainty of a child, that the future was a song she had not yet learned, but one she would, someday, know by heart. And that's where we'll end the story for now. Whenever I share one of these, I hope it gives you a chance to step out of the everyday and just drift for a bit. I'd love to know what you were doing while listening. Maybe relaxing after work, on a late-night drive, or just winding down. Drop a line in the comments. I really do read them all. And if you want to make sure we cross paths again, hitting like and subscribing makes a huge difference. We are always trying to improve our stories, so feel free to also drop your feedback in the comment section below. Thanks for spending this time with me.